Over the last 2 weeks, we've had two 18-year-old kids go into schools and shoot them up. Today, we had an 18-year-old that went into an elementary school and killed 14 students, 14 kids. What's going on in our society? We already have politicians going to the floor of the Senate, making their anti-gun proclamations, talking about how the government needs to do more to confiscate guns. But that's not the issue. There's something else going on here. There's something deep, there's something spiritual. And it's time for our society to get serious about addressing these problems. You could take all the guns off the street, but when you have people who are this demented, this evil, they're going to find ways to get some type of weapon to carry out their evil deeds. This young man, he gave out warnings. He sent out an email message, or should say a social media message to a woman saying, you know what, is coming, look what's coming next. Something cryptic message. But at the end of the day, we have kids that are going out and killing other kids that are killing people. Now, what I find kind of crazy is you have social media with their algorithms. They're able to flag anything. They're able to flag you. If you're talking about, a shot, they'll say that, you need to have some COVID-19 information there. You got people who get banned. You've got people who are getting flagged for making political threats. As the left would say, it's a political threat. That's what the social media will say. You're violating community standards. But somehow these kids that are going around killing other kids, they're on their social media. They're saying that they're going to do this, but there's no flagging. There's no heads up to the authorities. In some cases, we have the authorities that are even aware that these kids are having problems, that these kids are making these kinds of threats. Why don't we have more authorities stepping in? Where are the kids' parents? Where are the people surrounding these kids who understand that something is wrong? Now, you know what? They're there. And a lot of times they do give the authorities a heads up, and yet the authorities are not doing anything. How can we have social media out trying to crush free speech from individuals, but then when you get speech like this, speech that's violent, speech that's hinting towards violence, nothing goes on? For the last 2 years, we have been putting America's kids through hell. Whether we're talking about the masking of kids, or whether or not, or we're talking about shutting down their schools, keeping them isolated. And we don't have anybody talking about the mental anguish. We don't have anyone out there talking about what the actions of the government for shutting down everything is doing to our kids. The nihilism that it has implanted in kids who think that they have no future, that they have no chance. And then we have just kids who have gone completely off the rails, and we have nothing at all to address this issue. We're busy sending $40 billion over to Ukraine. Wouldn't that $40 billion be better spent trying to really dig down to find out what is driving people to take these evil acts? We have a government that wants to control every aspect of our life, but when it comes to these situations, their only answer is to remove guns. That's not the answer. Something else is going on here, something else that I think is on a spiritual level. We've lost our way as a country. Our country, which has been around here for more than 200 years, we've seen horror shows. We've had a civil war. We've had a World War I, a World War II. We've been involved in conflict. We've had our 9/11. We've gone through a pandemic. And yet it seems like the wheels are coming off of our society. And we are in a position now where we are absolutely harming our children. Whether we're talking about the sexual grooming that's going on in schools, whether we're talking about critical race theory that's going on in schools, we are doing everything but teaching our kids responsibility, teaching our kids to care for their fellow man, teaching our kids to love one another. All of those things are now pushed off into the fundamentalist religious camp. We're not allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to pray in schools. We're not allowed to talk about the Ten Commandments. We're not allowed to have them in our courtrooms. And somehow we just think that people are going to be good just to be good. That's not going on right now. We as a country are spiraling down, and the way we can know this by just looking at our kids. How are our kids responding to our laws? How are our kids responding to our politics? How are our kids dealing with society as we change it? Things were bad enough before we flipped everything upside down. And at the end of the day, we've got grieving families. We have another grieving community. We have dead children. And our media and our politicians, they just want to rush to the floor and pontificate and stand on the bodies of these dead kids. We haven't had time to even mourn, to process this. And yet we have politicians that are now running with their answers. And their answers do not take into account what's driving our youth to commit these type of acts. It's disturbing. In this latest school incident, the school shooting is not going to be the last one that we see in our culture. When are we going to get serious about digging down deep and finding out what is motivating our kids to act like this? When are we going to get serious and start having more spiritual conversations, not political conversations about what we can do or what we can take away from law-abiding citizens while ignoring the violence that's going on in our society? And I'm not just talking about the school shootings. We are totally ignoring what goes on in our major cities every single day, and especially on the weekends. We're talking about violence and unprecedented violence in our society. We're talking about crime that is rampant, that is completely out of control in some cities in this country. And it seems to me that the people in power, the people with influence, are just turning a blind eye or looking for someone to blame or trying to take advantage of the political situation. Again, in the last 2 weeks, we've had two 18-year-olds, go out and take people's lives. And this has been going on, really started in earnest in the 1990s. We didn't have these kind of problems in the early 20th century, the mid 20th century. It started in the late 20th century, and it really started Columbine, it started at Columbine with our kids. And now it's a thing. Now they can run to social media and they can read about the previous killings. And then you have copycats, deeply disturbed people who are going to decide they're going to one-up it. There are a lot of practical things that can be done to be put in place. But you know what? Instead of we having a department of disinformation, instead of the government trying to curtail speech, instead of the government trying to control every aspect of our political lives, it's time for us to have a serious conversation about what's happening socially in this country. Today is a terrible day. But we're going to have more terrible days ahead of us until we decide that we're going to get in deep to figure out what in the world is going on with the youth in this country, what in the world is going on with humans who just want to take other humans' lives. Pray for the people who lost loved ones today. Pray for that community in Texas. Pray for our country. And then let's decide to find out what truly is going on. And I'll tell you right here and right now, our battle isn't against flesh and blood. It's against the powers and principalities of this dark age. And we're going to need all of the spiritual help we can get, because we've created a mess. We've created a dystopia, a society that few people will want to live in just a few short years.